On Valentine's Day, my husband's mistress sent me a video, and for the first time in 43 years of marriage, I did not feel the need to ask him why. I was standing in my kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, with 2 plates warming in the oven and a chocolate cake sitting under a glass dome on the counter, the kind Charles used to buy me when we were young and had more bills than furniture. The house smelled like garlic butter, baked potatoes, and the expensive roses he had sent that afternoon with a card that said, "To my forever Valentine." His handwriting was not on it. Some assistant had typed the message, and even before my phone lit up, I remember thinking how strange it was that a man could send flowers to a woman he had stopped seeing years ago. Charles had texted me at 6:14 p.m. to say he was caught at headquarters and would be late. Not sorry. Not I love you. Just late. I looked at the 2 ribeye steaks cooling on the stove, the good china I had taken from the cabinet, the cloth napkins I still ironed because old habits make lonely evenings feel less empty, and I told myself not to be dramatic. At 67, a woman learns how to swallow disappointment in small, polite bites. Then the message arrived from a number I did not recognize. No greeting. No explanation. Just a video file and 6 words beneath it: "He chose me this year, Margaret." I knew her name before I pressed play. Lauren Hayes. Head of Communications at Whitmore Home Supply. 38 years old, polished blonde hair, white suits, soft voice, and the kind of smile that always seemed to arrive half a second before sincerity could catch up. I had seen her beside my husband in board photos, charity galas, staff meetings, company videos. Always close enough to be useful. Never close enough to be questioned. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming and the faint tick of the wall clock above the breakfast nook. Outside, February had pressed frost against the windows, turning the glass silver around the edges. I pressed play. The video opened inside Charles's office, the big corner one overlooking the parking lot and the old maple trees we had refused to cut down when we expanded the building in 1998. I knew every inch of that room. I had chosen the walnut desk when Charles still cared what I thought. I had picked the navy rug because the first gray one made the office look like a bank lobby. In the video, Charles stood near the desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled, laughing in that low voice he saved for people he wanted to impress. Lauren stood beside him with a folder in her hand. There was nothing explicit in what I saw, nothing I need to describe, and nothing I would have wanted anyone else to see. The betrayal was not in a gesture. It was in the comfort. The ease. The way she moved through his office like she belonged there more than I ever had. Then Charles spoke, and the room inside me went still. "After tonight," he said, "Margaret won't have the courage to show her face at Whitmore again." Lauren laughed softly and asked, "And the transition plan?" Charles answered, "Tomorrow morning. Daniel will back me. Rebecca already does. Once Margaret is embarrassed enough, she'll sign whatever we put in front of her." I stopped breathing for a few seconds. Not because my husband had been unfaithful to the vows we made in a small church with orange carpet and folding chairs. That wound landed, yes, but it was not the one that made my hand go cold. What froze me was hearing my name spoken like a business obstacle. Like a chair to be moved. Like a woman whose humiliation had been scheduled into a corporate strategy. I set the phone face down on the counter. The roses stood in their crystal vase, red and proud and ridiculous. One petal had fallen onto the white marble, bright as a warning. I looked at the dinner I had made for a man who was planning to erase me over morning coffee and board documents. I looked at the cake, the 2 forks, the card that said forever. Then I did something that would have surprised the younger version of me. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Not because it did not hurt. I smiled because Charles had made the oldest mistake powerful men make when they begin believing their own speeches. He had forgotten who built the room he was standing in. He had forgotten the winter of 1981, when I balanced invoices at our kitchen table while our baby slept in a laundry basket because we could not afford a crib and a second month of store rent at the same time. He had forgotten that I negotiated the first supplier contract, signed the first payroll checks, and kept Whitmore Home Supply alive while he learned how to sound confident in front of bankers. He had forgotten that before the company had a broadcast system, before it had shareholders and regional managers and glossy Valentine campaigns about family values, it had me. I picked up my phone again. This time, I did not watch as a wife. I watched as a founder. I replayed the video once, then twice, turning the volume higher, listening past the humiliation to the evidence hiding underneath it. A plan. A timeline. Names. Intent. Daniel. Rebecca. Tomorrow morning. Sign whatever we put in front of her. My son's name hurt more than Charles's voice. Daniel was 42, old enough to know silence is not neutrality when someone is being pushed out of her own life. Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, had been telling me for months that maybe I deserved rest, that maybe the company needed fresh energy, that maybe Charles was only trying to protect me from stress. Protect. That word looked different now. Everything did. At 6:47 p.m., Charles texted again. Don't wait up. I almost laughed then. I turned off the oven, wrapped the steaks in foil, and placed the untouched cake in the refrigerator. Then I carried the roses to the sink, not to throw them away, but to look at them one last time without the soft lighting of denial. They were beautiful. That was the cruel part. Lies often arrive looking expensive. I saved the video to my phone, then to my laptop, then to the small external drive I kept in the desk drawer Charles never opened because he thought household things were beneath him. After that, I walked upstairs to the closet, took out my black wool suit, the one I wore when Whitmore opened its 50th store, and hung it on the bedroom door. I laid my pearls beside it. Not the new ones Charles bought when guilt made him generous. The old ones. My mother's. At 7:32 p.m., I called Evelyn Price, our retired corporate attorney and the only person who still remembered that my signature was on the original documents. When she answered, I said, "Evelyn, I need you at headquarters before noon tomorrow." She was quiet for one beat, then asked, "Is this about Charles?" I looked at my wedding ring, turned it once around my finger, and said, "No. It's about Whitmore." That night, I did not cry. I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, the video file open beside me, and the company broadcast schedule printed in front of me. Lauren had planned a Valentine presentation for all employees the next morning. 600 people across Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky would be watching Charles speak about trust, legacy, and family. He thought shame would silence me. He forgot I helped build the microphone. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, though I do not think I truly slept at all. The house was still dark, and Charles had never come home. His side of the bed remained smooth, the pillow untouched, the room carrying that particular silence that comes when a truth has entered a home and rearranged all the furniture without moving a single chair. I made coffee the way I always did, 2 scoops more than Charles liked because he believed strong coffee was bad for his nerves, while somehow believing betrayal was not. The kitchen looked ordinary in the pale blue light before dawn. The roses were still in the vase. The cake was still in the refrigerator. The 2 wrapped steaks sat on the middle shelf like evidence of a dinner that had died quietly. I stood there in my robe, holding my mug with both hands, and let myself travel backward. Not because nostalgia helps, but because sometimes a woman has to remember who she was before other people taught her to shrink. In 1981, Whitmore Home Supply was not a company. It was a narrow storefront between a dry cleaner and a used bookstore on the east side of Columbus. The sign was painted by Charles himself because we could not afford a professional one. The letters were uneven, and the word supply leaned slightly upward at the end, as if even the paint was trying to climb out of poverty. We had $1,200 in savings, a 6-month lease, a newborn son, and a used cash register that jammed every third sale. Charles was charming. I will give him that. He could make a customer believe a kitchen cabinet was not just wood and hinges, but the beginning of a better life. People liked him. Bankers liked him. Contractors liked him. He had a way of standing with his shoulders back, speaking as if success had already agreed to meet him halfway. But charm does not reconcile invoices. Charm does not call suppliers at 7 in the morning and convince them to extend payment terms another 30 days. Charm does not sit at a kitchen table after midnight with a crying baby in the next room, deciding whether the electric bill or the vendor bill gets paid first. I did those things. Quietly. Repeatedly. Without applause. I learned payroll by reading library books. I learned inventory because mistakes cost money we did not have. I learned which contractors paid late, which suppliers lied about delivery dates, and which customers needed a gentle voice before they trusted a new business. Charles shook hands in the front of the store. I kept the store breathing in the back. For years, that arrangement felt like partnership. Not equal in public, perhaps, but equal in the private language of survival. He would come home exhausted, kiss my forehead, and say, "Maggie, I could not do this without you." Back then, I believed him. I believed the sentence so completely that I never asked him to say it where anyone else could hear. That was my mistake, or maybe just my generation. Women like me were raised to think support was noble, that being needed was almost the same as being respected. We confused sacrifice with security. We thought love kept records even when men did not. By the time Whitmore opened its 10th store, Charles had begun using different language. In interviews with the local business journal, he said, "I started with nothing but determination." At Chamber of Commerce dinners, he joked that I was the reason he remembered to eat dinner, not the reason the company survived its first recession. People laughed. I smiled. A wife learns to smile when the joke costs less than a confrontation. At first, the erasing came in small amounts, like dust gathering on a picture frame. My name disappeared from speeches. Then from decisions. Then from the rooms where decisions were made. Charles said it was because I deserved rest. Daniel said Dad just moved faster in business settings. Rebecca said I had earned the right to enjoy my later years. It all sounded kind when spoken over brunch, especially by people who benefited from my absence. Lauren Hayes entered the company 3 years before the video, during what Charles called a brand refresh. I remember the first day I met her because she shook my hand with both of hers, looked directly into my eyes, and said, "Mrs. Whitmore, your legacy here is just beautiful." Legacy. Not leadership. Not ownership. Not work. Legacy, as if I were a framed photograph in the lobby, something sentimental and already finished. She was polished in that modern corporate way, all clean lines and careful warmth. She wore cream blazers, nude heels, and a perfume that lingered in conference rooms after she left. She knew how to flatter older men without appearing obvious. She listened with her head tilted slightly, laughed one breath too late, and repeated Charles's ideas back to him with sharper wording so he could admire himself in her vocabulary. I noticed it. Of course I noticed it. A woman married for more than 4 decades notices when her husband begins standing taller for someone else. But noticing is not the same as admitting. Admission changes the air. It makes dinner plates heavier, hallway photographs crueler, and ordinary questions dangerous. So I told myself Lauren was ambitious. I told myself Charles was vain but harmless. I told myself Daniel would never allow anyone to push me out of what I had helped build. That last lie was the one that hurt most by morning. At 6:30, I showered, dressed, and pinned my silver hair into the neat twist Charles once said made me look severe. Good, I thought. Severe suited the day. I put on the black wool suit, my mother's pearls, and low heels comfortable enough to stand in for a long fight. Then I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of our bed and removed a folder Charles had forgotten existed. Inside were the original partnership documents, early board minutes, shareholder agreements, and a yellowed copy of the first lease for the little storefront with the crooked sign. My signature was everywhere. Margaret Elaine Whitmore. Not Mrs. Charles Whitmore. Not the founder's wife. Not legacy. Margaret Elaine Whitmore. I placed the folder in a brown leather bag and drove to headquarters as the sun came up over the freeway, turning the frost on the shoulder of Interstate 70 into thin strips of light. Whitmore Home Supply stood 3 stories tall now, with glass doors, landscaped hedges, and a digital sign cycling through the Valentine campaign Lauren had designed. Built on family. Powered by trust. I sat in the parking lot for a moment and watched those words glow against the morning. Then my phone buzzed. Evelyn Price had arrived. Her message was simple. I am in the lobby. Bring everything. I looked at the building my life had been poured into one quiet year at a time, picked up my bag, and stepped out of the car. For the first time in years, I did not enter as someone's wife. I entered as a woman returning to her own name. The lobby smelled like fresh paint, coffee, and the kind of expensive floral arrangement Lauren insisted made clients feel emotionally aligned with the brand. 24 white and red roses stood in a tall glass vase near the reception desk, beneath the digital screen announcing the morning broadcast. Built on family. Powered by trust. I read it once, then looked away before the words could insult me twice. Evelyn Price stood near the elevators in a charcoal coat, her silver hair cut into a sharp bob, her leather briefcase held in both hands like she had come to court instead of a corporate office. She was 72 and moved with the steady patience of a woman who had watched many powerful men confuse volume with authority. Margaret, she said, not warmly, not coldly, but with the calm of someone who understood that tenderness would have broken me. I handed her the brown leather bag. She did not open it in the lobby. She simply nodded toward the small conference room beside reception, the one Lauren had renamed the reflection room because ordinary names were apparently no longer good enough for tables and chairs. Inside, Evelyn closed the door, pulled the blinds halfway down, and spread the documents across the polished surface. My original partnership agreement. The first operating structure. The amended shareholder terms from 1994. The ethics policy Charles had signed when we took on outside investors. The internal communications rules Lauren herself had updated the year before. Paper by paper, my life stopped being memory and became evidence. Evelyn put on her reading glasses and moved through everything without wasting a word. I watched her hands. They were steady. Mine were not. Show me the recording, she said. I placed my phone on the table and played the 42 seconds I had clipped during the night. I had removed every private image that did not belong in a workplace matter. What remained was worse than a scandal. It was strategy. Charles's voice filled the small room, relaxed and certain. Once Margaret is embarrassed enough, she will sign whatever we put in front of her. Lauren's laugh followed, light as broken glass. Evelyn did not react until the file ended. Then she removed her glasses and placed them on top of the shareholder agreement. This is not just marital misconduct, she said. This is a governance problem. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. That is what I thought. It is more than that, she said. It suggests coercion, undisclosed conflict of interest, planned manipulation of a founding shareholder, and possible misuse of company resources. The board must hear this before Charles presents anything for signature. Hearing the words said plainly did something to me. It did not make the pain smaller. It made the room larger. For 12 hours, I had been standing inside my own humiliation. Evelyn had opened a door and shown me the structure around it. Lauren had wanted me to watch that video as a wife, to feel old, replaced, and foolish. Charles had counted on the private wound becoming public shame. But corporate documents do not care about a woman's wrinkles. They care about signatures, authority, and process. My signature was still there. My authority was still there. The process had not happened yet. Evelyn tapped the ethics policy with one finger. The broadcast begins at 9. I nodded. Lauren controls the media file? Usually. Not today, Evelyn said. We need information technology, the board chair, and one witness from human resources. I almost smiled. Evelyn had always believed in witnesses. Charles believed in charm. Lauren believed in optics. Evelyn believed in a paper trail. We left the conference room together, and the building had started to fill with employees. Young managers with travel mugs. Warehouse supervisors in branded jackets. Reception staff pinning small red hearts to their lanyards because Lauren's campaign had required visible unity. A few people greeted me with surprise. Some called me Mrs. Whitmore. Some looked past me as if they were not sure whether I still belonged in the building. That uncertainty told me more than open disrespect would have. It meant the erasing had worked slowly enough that decent people had mistaken it for retirement. As we walked toward the executive elevators, I saw Lauren near the lobby screen, speaking into a headset. She wore a white suit, of course. White on Valentine's Day, as if she were purity itself wrapped in tailoring. Her hair fell in perfect waves over one shoulder, and her smile widened when she saw me. Not with alarm. With pleasure. She thought I had come because the video had wounded me exactly as intended. She removed one side of the headset and approached with both hands slightly raised, the gesture of a woman pretending concern while measuring damage. "Margaret," she said softly. "I was not expecting you this morning." "I imagine not." Her eyes flicked to Evelyn, then to the leather bag at my side. "Charles is preparing for the broadcast. It might be better if you and I spoke privately before things get emotional." There it was. Emotional. The little box they had built for me. Every time I objected, I was emotional. Every time Charles dismissed me, he was strategic. Every time Lauren insulted me with silk gloves, she was professional. I looked at her headset, her company badge, the red heart pinned near her lapel. "I am not here for a private conversation, Lauren." Her smile tightened. Just slightly. Most people would have missed it. I did not. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you need. I need the broadcast file reviewed before it goes live." "That has already been handled." "Not by legal." Evelyn stepped forward then, small but immovable. "I will need access to the control room and the final media sequence." Lauren's face did not change, but the air around her did. "Evelyn, I thought you were retired." "Semi-retired," Evelyn said. "It leaves me available for emergencies." The word emergency landed between us. Lauren heard it. So did I. Before Lauren could answer, the elevator doors opened and Daniel stepped out with Rebecca beside him. My son wore a gray suit and the expression of a man already tired of a problem he had not bothered to understand. Rebecca, elegant in a burgundy coat, saw me and stopped. "Margaret," she said, too brightly. "I did not know you were coming in today." That seems to be a popular feeling. Daniel glanced at Evelyn, then back at me. "Mom, Dad has a full morning. Maybe this is not the best time." My son's voice was gentle. That made it worse. Cruelty at least has the courage to reveal itself. Gentleness can hide cowardice for years. I looked at him and remembered the baby in the laundry basket, the little boy sleeping under my desk during inventory nights, the teenager I drove 40 miles to baseball tournaments because Charles was always too busy building the future. Now he stood in the lobby of that future, asking me to make myself convenient. "Daniel," I said, "did your father tell you what he planned to ask me to sign today?" His jaw shifted. Rebecca looked down at her phone. There it was again. Silence dressed as innocence. Lauren stepped in quickly. "I think everyone is under a lot of pressure. The broadcast is about unity. Perhaps afterward we can schedule a family discussion." Family. She used the word like a company logo. I turned to the digital screen again. Built on family. Powered by trust. For the first time all morning, anger rose in me clean and bright, not loud, not wild, just clear. "No," I said. "We are done scheduling my disappearance." Daniel blinked. Lauren's hand tightened around her headset. Evelyn placed the original shareholder agreement into my hands, opened to the page where my name sat beside Charles's in blue ink from 45 years earlier. Margaret Elaine Whitmore. I looked at my son, then at the woman who had learned to call theft a transition plan, and I finally understood something. Lauren had not created the emptiness around Charles. She had only furnished it. He had spent years clearing space for betrayal, one omitted credit, one private meeting, one rewritten story at a time. Now she stood in that space wearing white and calling it strategy. At 8:46, Evelyn and I stepped into the elevator without asking permission. As the doors began to close, I saw Lauren reach for her phone. I saw Rebecca whisper something to Daniel. I saw my son fail, once again, to move. The elevator rose toward the third floor, toward the broadcast studio, toward the room where Charles expected to speak about trust. I held the old agreement against my chest and felt my hands become steady. Some betrayals arrive like storms. Others arrive as rebranding. The third floor of headquarters had changed more than any other part of the building. When Charles and I first bought the property, that floor held damaged inventory, spare shelving, and a break room with a coffee machine that sounded like it was grinding gravel. Now it had glass walls, polished concrete floors, framed campaign posters, and a broadcast studio Lauren had designed to look like a national morning show. There were soft gray chairs, warm lights, a backdrop with the Whitmore Home Supply logo, and a long monitor already displaying the Valentine slogan in red and white. Built on family. Powered by trust. A young technician named Miles looked up from the control desk when Evelyn and I entered. He could not have been more than 28, with nervous eyes and a company fleece zipped to his chin. He recognized me, then recognized Evelyn, then seemed to realize the morning had become larger than his job description. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "Good morning." Miss Hayes said all media files were already approved. "Miss Hayes does not have final authority over legal review," Evelyn replied. Her voice was quiet enough to make people listen harder. Miles swallowed. "I can pull up the sequence." He turned to the screens, and I stood behind him, watching the broadcast schedule unfold in neat digital blocks. Opening animation. Charles welcome remarks. Founder history montage. Lauren campaign introduction. Valentine employee appreciation video. Closing statement. The founder history montage made my stomach tighten before I even saw it. Miles clicked the preview. Music swelled from the speakers, bright and sentimental. The first image showed Charles in front of the original storefront, smiling beside the crooked sign he had painted. The narration, recorded in Lauren's smooth voice, said, "In 1981, Charles Whitmore founded a company with nothing but a dream, a truck, and a promise to serve families across Ohio." I waited. The next photo showed Charles shaking hands with a supplier. Then Charles cutting a ribbon. Then Charles standing with Daniel as a little boy in front of stacked paint cans. My face did not appear. Not once. Not in the storefront. Not behind the counter. Not at the 10-store opening where I had worked 3 nights without sleep to prepare payroll and vendor payments. Not at the 50th store celebration where I had worn the black wool suit now resting on my shoulders like armor. I watched the montage erase me in high definition, with soft piano music and heart graphics in the corner. Evelyn glanced at me, but I did not speak. There are moments when outrage would only give people an excuse to call you unstable. So I stood still and let the omission testify. "Pause it," Evelyn said. Miles froze the video on a photograph of Charles in 1994, grinning under a banner that read Whitmore opens store number 12. I remembered that day clearly because I had spent the morning in urgent care with Daniel after he broke his wrist falling off his bicycle, then driven straight to the ribbon cutting with hospital papers still in my purse. Charles had complained that I looked tired in the photos. Lauren had solved that problem by choosing one without me in it. Who approved this historical summary? Evelyn asked. Miles looked miserable. Miss Hayes and Mr. Whitmore. The executive folder said final. Replace it, I said. My own voice surprised me. Not loud. Not trembling. Just certain. Miles turned slowly. With what file, ma'am? I opened my leather bag and removed a small drive. During the night, while the house sat silent and Charles remained wherever he had chosen to be, I had done more than clip the video. I had gathered photographs. The storefront lease. The first payroll ledger. The newspaper clipping from 1983 that named both of us. A picture of me at the counter holding Daniel on my hip while ringing up a contractor's order. A photo of Charles and me signing the first expansion loan, my hand resting on the papers beside his. Not revenge. Correction. This one, I said. Miles hesitated, then took the drive. Evelyn placed a printed copy of the original partnership document beside his keyboard, open to my signature. You are complying with a founding shareholder and legal counsel, she said. Document the change. His fingers moved quickly after that. Fear can make people slow. Clarity makes them efficient. Through the glass wall, I saw Charles enter the studio from the far hallway. He wore a navy suit and a red tie, smiling as two assistants adjusted the lapel microphone on his jacket. He looked rested. That offended me more than I expected. There is a special kind of cruelty in watching someone look refreshed the morning after they have helped ruin your sleep. Lauren walked in a moment later, still speaking into her headset, her face composed but tighter now. She had seen us come upstairs. She knew something had shifted, even if she did not yet know how much. Charles noticed me through the glass, and for one brief second his expression slipped. Not guilt. Irritation. The look of a man seeing rain clouds over an outdoor party he had already paid for. He excused himself from the assistants and came into the control room. Margaret, he said, lowering his voice as if kindness were a curtain he could pull over the windows. This is not the time. I looked at him, really looked at him. The silver at his temples. The expensive watch on his wrist. The confidence built partly from my labor and partly from his belief that I would never interrupt him in public. You are right, I said. This is not the time for what you planned. His eyes moved to Evelyn, then to the documents on the desk, then to Miles. What is going on? Lauren appeared behind him before anyone answered. Charles, we are 3 minutes from Liv. Her voice stayed professional, but her eyes were on the drive beside Miles's hand. Why is legal in the control room? Evelyn picked up the ethics policy. Because a communication prepared for company-wide distribution may contain material omissions regarding company history and governance. Lauren gave a small laugh. A historical montage is not a legal matter. It is when it is used to support a transition plan that excludes a founding shareholder, Evelyn said. Charles went still. There it was. The first real crack. Not in his face, exactly, but in the space between what he thought I knew and what I actually knew. Lauren stepped closer to him, too close for an employee concerned with optics. She caught herself and stopped. I saw it. Evelyn saw it. Charles saw that we saw it. Margaret, he said again, but this time my name did not sound like a wife's name. It sounded like an obstacle. We can discuss this after the broadcast. No, I said. You counted on after. You counted on private rooms, tired signatures, and my embarrassment doing half your work for you. His jaw tightened. Lauren's hand touched her headset. We need to go live. From the studio, Daniel appeared near the doorway with Rebecca behind him. My son looked from his father to me, confused and uneasy. For a moment, I wanted him to step forward. Not as an executive. As my child. I wanted him to ask what had happened. I wanted him to stand beside me before knowing whether it benefited him. He did not. Miles lifted one finger from the control board. 30 seconds. The studio lights brightened. Charles looked at the monitor, then at me. The broadcast was larger than his pride now. 600 employees across 3 states were waiting for the man who had built a brand on family to tell them what trust meant. Lauren smoothed her jacket and turned toward the studio, but Evelyn spoke before she could leave. The revised file is in the sequence. Any attempt to remove it now will be recorded. Lauren paused. Charles did not move. I stepped closer to the glass and looked into the studio where my husband's chair waited under warm lights. The same lights that had softened every lie for years. My hands were steady now. Not because I was unhurt. Because the hurt had finally found a purpose. Charles walked to his mark. Lauren took her place near the side monitor. Daniel remained in the doorway. Miles whispered, 5, 4, 3, then pointed toward the studio. The red light came on. Charles smiled into the camera. "Good morning, Whitmore family," he said. And for the first time in a very long time, I was ready for the truth to answer him. Charles had always been good with cameras. He knew how to soften his eyes, how to pause after the word family, how to make 600 employees believe they were not just working for a company, but belonging to a story. I watched him from behind the glass as he welcomed the teams in Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and Louisville. His voice carried through the control room speakers, warm and practiced. "This company began with one simple belief," he said, smiling into the lens. "That a home is more than walls and furniture. It is trust. It is commitment. It is the people who stand beside you year after year." Lauren stood just outside the camera frame, watching him with the satisfied expression of someone seeing her script performed well. Daniel remained near the doorway with his arms folded, and Rebecca stood beside him, her phone held low as if she were already preparing messages for whatever version of the morning would protect her best. Evelyn stood at my right shoulder, silent. Miles sat at the control board with both hands hovering near the keys. On the monitor, employee comments began appearing in the internal chat. "Happy Valentine's Day from Store 12. Louisville team checking in. Love the new campaign." Charles continued. "Today, as we celebrate the values that built Whitmore Home Supply, I want to honor the legacy of this company and the future we are stepping into together." Legacy. There it was again, that pretty word people use when they want to praise you and bury you at the same time. Miles glanced back at me. The founder history segment was next. I nodded once. The original montage Lauren had approved would have shown Charles as a lone hero, turning 43 years of shared labor into a one-man legend with piano music behind it. Instead, the screen faded into a photograph of the old storefront from 1981. The crooked sign. The narrow window. The cracked sidewalk. Then came a second photograph. Me behind the counter, 24 years old, hair pulled back, Daniel asleep in a carrier by my feet while my hand rested on an open ledger. The music continued, but Lauren's recorded narration did not. Evelyn had removed it. In its place, simple captions appeared: Charles and Margaret Whitmore, first storefront, Columbus, Ohio, 1981. Founding partners. I heard Charles stop breathing through the microphone. It was only a tiny sound, but after 43 years, I knew it. The slideshow moved on. A scan of the original lease. Both signatures. A newspaper clipping from the Columbus Dispatch naming both of us as co-owners. A photograph of me standing beside a delivery truck in January snow, wearing a coat too thin for the weather, checking inventory while Charles shook hands with a contractor. A picture from store number 10, where my name was printed on the ribbon-cutting program before later versions of company history forgot how ink worked. In the chat, the comments changed. Did not know Mrs. Whitmore was a founder. Wow, this is amazing history. Margaret helped start the company? Charles turned slightly toward Lauren, still smiling because the camera was on him, but his eyes were sharp now. Lauren touched her headset. "Cut this," she whispered. Miles froze, his face pale. Evelyn leaned forward and said quietly, "Do not." The montage ended on a close-up of the partnership agreement. Margaret Elaine Whitmore. Charles Robert Whitmore. Equal founding interest. The studio was silent for half a second too long. Charles recovered, because recovery had always been one of his talents. "Well," he said with a light laugh, that was certainly a deeper look into our early archives than I expected. He tried to make it charming. He tried to turn the truth into a harmless surprise. Margaret has always been a treasured part of the Whitmore story. Treasured part. Story. Not founder. Not partner. Not owner. My hand tightened around the folder, but I did not move yet. Not because I lacked courage, but because timing matters. If you speak too soon, they call it interruption. If you wait until the lie has fully dressed itself, the truth does not have to raise its voice. Charles continued into the next section. As we move forward, every great company must prepare for change. Later today, our board will discuss a transition plan designed to protect Whitmore's future for the next generation. Daniel looked at the floor. Rebecca closed her eyes for one brief second. Lauren's mouth became a hard line. So it was true. They had not just discussed it in a careless private moment. The plan existed. The document was waiting. My embarrassment was supposed to be the weather that made everyone accept it. Charles lifted a page from the small podium. Change can be difficult, he said. Especially for those who have given many years to a company. But leadership requires clarity. Evelyn leaned closer to Miles. Now, she said. The monitor shifted. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just a clean transition to a black screen with white text, excerpts submitted for legal review regarding proposed transition plan. Then Charles's own voice filled the room. After tonight, Margaret will not have the courage to show her face at Whitmore again. In the studio, Charles went completely still. Lauren's hand rose to her mouth, then dropped as she remembered people were watching. The audio continued. Lauren's voice asked, "And the transition plan?" Charles answered, "Tomorrow morning. Daniel will back me. Rebecca already does. Once Margaret is embarrassed enough, she will sign whatever we put in front of her." 42 seconds. That was all. No private images. No cheap spectacle. No cruelty. For cruelty's sake. Just enough truth to remove every costume from the room. The broadcast feed did not cut. The employees heard it. The board members watching remotely heard it. The regional managers heard it. The people who had spent years calling me Mrs. Whitmore as if that were my only title heard my husband describe my humiliation as a business tool. When the clip ended, no one spoke. Even the internal chat stopped moving. Silence can be louder than outrage when 600 people arrive at the same conclusion together. Charles looked toward the control room glass, and for the first time that morning, there was no performance left on his face. Lauren stepped toward the camera, then stopped because there was nowhere professional to stand inside what had just been revealed. Daniel whispered, "Mom," but the word did not reach me as an apology. Not yet. Charles removed his lapel microphone too quickly, causing a sharp rustle through the speakers. "Cut the feed," he said. Evelyn pressed the intercom button before Miles could react. "The feed remains live until legal concludes the review statement." Then she looked at me. I opened the control room door and walked into the studio. The lights were warm on my face. The camera was closer than I expected. Charles stood 2 feet from the podium, breathing hard through his nose, trying to decide whether to look like a wronged husband, a betrayed executive, or a man caught under his own chandelier. I did not look at Lauren. Not first. I looked at the lens. I looked at every employee who had ever worked late, followed policy, trusted leadership, and believed our name meant something. "Good morning," I said. My voice was calm. That seemed to frighten Charles more than anger would have. "My name is Margaret Elaine Whitmore. I am not a treasured part of this company's story. I am one of its founders." Charles whispered, "Margaret, do not do this." I turned to him then. "You already did." The room held its breath. I placed the original partnership agreement on the podium, smoothing the old paper with my palm. This morning was supposed to begin with a Valentine message about family and trust. Instead, it has become necessary to clarify what those words mean when people in power use them as decoration. Lauren's face had gone pale, but still I did not insult her. I would not reduce myself to the language of jealousy when the issue was bigger than betrayal. "A personal relationship is painful," I said. "A hidden plan to use that relationship, company authority, and public humiliation to pressure a founding shareholder is not personal. It is corporate misconduct. Evelyn stepped into the studio and handed me the ethics policy. I did not need to read every line. Only the one that mattered. Any executive who conceals a conflict of interest, misuses company resources, or acts to damage the governance stability of Whitmore Home Supply may be placed under immediate review by the board. Charles shook his head. This is absurd. I looked at him with the full weight of 43 years. No, Charles. Absurd was thinking I would mistake shame for surrender. For several seconds, no one moved. The camera light remained red, the studio lights remained warm, and the company slogan still glowed on the monitor behind Charles as if it had not just been stripped of meaning in front of everyone. I could hear the faint buzz of the equipment, the soft click of Miles typing in the control room, the quiet breath Evelyn took beside me. Those ordinary sounds kept me steady. They reminded me that truth does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives through a microphone, an old signature, and a woman who has finally stopped asking permission to stand where she belongs. Charles looked past me toward the control room. This feed needs to end now, he said. Not to me. Not even to Evelyn. To the room, as if the building itself still obeyed him. Evelyn answered first. The feed will remain active for the board's notice. The remote directors have already been notified. That sentence changed his face. Charles had been angry before. Now he was calculating. His eyes moved quickly, from me to Evelyn, from Evelyn to the camera, from the camera to Daniel. He was looking for the old exits. Charm. Authority. Family pressure. Delay. Those doors had always opened for him. That morning, one by one, they stayed. Shut. Lauren stepped forward, her headset hanging around her neck like a broken necklace. This is being handled completely inappropriately, she said. Her voice was softer than usual, but sharp underneath. A private issue has been taken out of context and displayed to employees who should never have been involved. I turned to her slowly. Employees became involved when you use company systems, company time, and a company broadcast to support a transition built on deception. Her cheeks flushed. That is not what happened. Then explain it. I let the words sit there. Lauren opened her mouth, but nothing useful came out. That was the trouble with polished people when polish meets documentation. They shine until someone turns on a brighter light. Charles moved closer to the podium. Margaret, you are hurt. I understand that. But this is not how leadership behaves. I almost smiled at that. Leadership. Another word he had worn like a tailored suit while I hemmed the seams from the shadows. Leadership does not require silence from the person being deceived, I said. And hurt does not make evidence disappear. Behind him, Daniel finally stepped into the studio. My son looked younger than 42 in that moment, not in appearance, but in spirit. He looked like a boy caught between a father he feared disappointing and a mother he assumed would forgive him. Rebecca stayed near the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her burgundy coat. She was not crying. She was watching the room the way people watch stock prices fall. Mom, Daniel said carefully, maybe we should pause this and go into the boardroom. Why? I asked. So your father can lower his voice and call it concern? So Lauren can call it a misunderstanding? So Rebecca can tell me this is bad for the family? His face tightened at his wife's name. I did not know about the video. That was not my question. The silence that followed was different from the first one. The first had belonged to the company. This one belonged to us. Did you know there was a transition plan? I asked. Daniel looked at Charles. That was answer enough, but he still tried to speak around it. Dad said it was time to modernize the structure. He said you were tired. He said you did not want the stress anymore. I nodded once. And did you ask me? He looked down. There are wounds that do not bleed but still leave stains. Watching my son avoid my eyes in front of the company I had helped build was one of them. I had survived Charles's betrayal through shock, documents, and purpose. Daniel's failure arrived more quietly. It sat down beside me like an old grief. Evelyn stepped forward and addressed the camera with the professional steadiness that had saved more than one company from theatrical men. Effective immediately, pursuant to the governance and ethics provisions signed by executive leadership, the proposed transition plan is suspended pending independent review. Mr. Charles Whitmore will be asked to recuse himself from any board action related to Margaret Whitmore's ownership interest, voting rights, or executive role. Miss Lauren Hayes will be placed on administrative leave pending review of communications, access, and conflict disclosures. Lauren inhaled sharply. You cannot do that on a broadcast. Evelyn did not blink. It is being stated on a broadcast because the matter was introduced through a broadcast. Formal notices have already been delivered to board members and human resources. Charles gave a short laugh, empty and hard. This is ridiculous. I am still Chief Executive Officer. For the next few minutes, perhaps, Evelyn said. The internal chat began moving again on the monitor in the control room, fast enough that I could not read every line. Some employees wrote my name. Some asked if the stores should remain open. A regional manager from Dayton asked whether customer operations would be affected. That question steadied me more than sympathy could have. The company still needed to function. People had paychecks, deliveries, families, rent, mortgage payments, children in school. My pain was real, but so were their lives. I faced the camera again. All stores and distribution schedules will continue as normal today. Your jobs are not in danger because the truth came out. The purpose of leadership is not to hide problems. It is to protect the people who trusted us with their work. Charles muttered, "You are enjoying this." I turned to him. No. That is the difference between us. His expression changed, just for a second. The insult had landed because it was quiet. Lauren reached for her phone, but Evelyn lifted one hand. Please do not delete or alter any company communications. Lauren froze. Rebecca finally spoke from the doorway. This is going to destroy everything. I looked at my daughter-in-law, at the woman who had told me over Sunday brunch that stepping back would be graceful, that Daniel deserved a clear path, that older women sometimes struggled to release control. No, Rebecca, I said. This is what happens when people mistake a woman's grace for vacancy. Daniel flinched. Charles removed the microphone from his jacket and placed it on the podium with unnecessary care, as if manners could cover collapse. I will be in my office, he said. You will be in the boardroom, Evelyn corrected. With counsel present. For the first time since I had known him, Charles did not get the final word. He looked at me then, not as his wife, not as the woman who had ironed his shirts and hosted his dinners and smoothed his public edges for 43 years, but as an opponent he had underestimated too long. I felt no triumph. Only a strange, clean sorrow. The broadcast ended with Evelyn's instruction, not Charles's blessing. The red camera light went dark. Around us, the studio seemed smaller. Without performance, it was only a room with wires, chairs, and people who had run out of scripts. Daniel took one step toward me. Mom, I am sorry. I looked at his face and wanted to believe the words were heavy enough to matter. But apologies spoken after exposure are lighter than warnings spoken before harm. Not here, I said. He stopped. I gathered the original documents from the podium, sliding each page back into the folder with care. My hands were still steady. That surprised me. Or perhaps it should not have. I had been holding things together for so many years that steadiness had become muscle memory. As Evelyn and I walked toward the boardroom, employees in the hallway stepped aside. No one clapped. No one cheered. I was grateful for that. This was not entertainment to me. It was the morning my marriage ended in public because my husband had tried to end my life's work in private. At the boardroom door, I paused and looked back through the glass wall toward the empty studio. The Valentine slogan still glowed faintly on the screen. Built on family. Powered by trust. I read it one last time and understood what had been wrong with it all along. Trust is not a slogan. Family is not a shield. And a woman who helped build the house does not need permission to turn on the lights. The boardroom smelled of lemon polish and old decisions. I had sat at that table for decades, sometimes as a voting member, often as an inconvenience, and in later years as a symbolic presence invited only when someone needed the room to look balanced for photographs. That morning, every chair felt different. Charles sat at the far end, not at the head, because Evelyn had reached the room first and placed the governance binder there before he arrived. It was a small thing. A chair. A binder. A shift of inches. But power often reveals itself in where people assume they are allowed to sit. 2 board members joined by video, one from Cleveland and one from Indianapolis. The remaining 3 came in person, faces tense, coffee untouched. Human Resources sent Marcia Bell, a woman with tired eyes and a notebook already open. Miles from Information Technology waited near the wall with a laptop and a look of deep regret for having chosen a career involving other people's secrets. Daniel sat halfway between Charles and me, which told the truth more clearly than any speech could have. Rebecca was not invited into the room, though I saw her through the glass wall once, standing in the hallway with her phone pressed to her ear. Lauren was asked to surrender her company laptop and access badge pending review. She did not cry. I will say that for her. She lifted her chin, stated that she had done nothing wrong, and walked out with the careful dignity of someone who still believed a better story could be written later. Charles watched her leave. He tried not to, but I saw his eyes follow her. After 43 years, I knew the difference between concern and calculation. Evelyn began without drama. She laid out the timeline, the unauthorized transition proposal, the broadcast file originally approved by Charles and Lauren, the video clip containing their own words, and the documents proving my founding interest. She did not embellish. She did not need to. Facts are powerful because they do not require good lighting. Charles interrupted twice in the first 10 minutes. The first time, he said the recording was private and emotionally motivated. The second time, he said I had misunderstood the transition plan. Evelyn let him finish both times, then slid printed transcripts across the table. The issue before the board is not marital conduct, she said. The issue is whether an executive used an undisclosed personal relationship, internal communications authority, and a coordinated embarrassment strategy to pressure a founding shareholder into surrendering influence. One of the board members, Gerald Munson, cleared his throat. Gerald had known us since the 3rd store opened in Dayton. He was 74 now, with reading glasses low on his nose and a habit of speaking slowly so people understood he was not confused. Charles, he said, did you intend to ask Margaret to sign documents today? Charles leaned back. We intended to discuss a modernization package. That was not my question. The room changed when Gerald said that. Old men are often forgiven for bluntness. I decided to accept the gift. Charles looked at the transcript, then at me. Yes. There were documents prepared. Did Margaret's counsel receive them? Evelyn asked. He said nothing. Did Margaret receive them? Gerald asked. Charles's jaw moved. Not yet. But Daniel had seen them? Gerald asked. My son shifted in his chair. Charles glanced at him, and Daniel finally understood what it meant to be used as support in a plan he had not fully examined. I saw a summary, Daniel said quietly. Dad told me it was about succession. And your mother? Gerald asked. Daniel looked at me then. Really looked. There was shame in his face, but shame is only useful if it arrives before the damage. I thought she knew more than she did, he said. I folded my hands on the table to keep from reacting. There it was. The soft language of people who benefit from not knowing. I thought. I assumed. Nobody told me. Phrases that sound innocent until you realize they all mean the same thing. I did not ask because asking might have required courage. Evelyn opened the ethics binder. The emergency provision allows temporary suspension of executive authority when there is credible evidence of conflict concealment, governance manipulation, or conduct that may damage the company. Charles laughed under his breath. Are we truly pretending this company can operate without me? No one answered quickly. In the past, that silence would have fed him. That morning, it exposed him. I looked around the room and saw people measuring something they had avoided measuring for years. Charles had become the face of Whitmore, but faces are not foundations. Stores opened because managers opened them. Deliveries arrived because drivers drove them. Payroll cleared because finance processed it. Customers returned because employees treated them well. Charles had mistaken visibility for indispensability. I knew that mistake because I had helped create it. I had let him stand in the light for so long that even I sometimes forgot how much work happened outside it. Marcia from Human Resources spoke next. For employee confidence, we need a clear interim plan before close of business. The broadcast has already circulated internally. People are concerned, but operations are stable. Practical words. Beautiful words. Stable operations had always comforted me more than grand declarations. Evelyn turned to me. Margaret, are you prepared to resume active board authority during the review period? Charles looked as if she had suggested handing me the keys to an airplane mid-flight. Daniel looked startled too, which hurt in a quieter way. I did not answer immediately. I thought of the young woman in 1981 counting drawer cash after midnight. I thought of the mother signing payroll while Daniel slept under a blanket beside the filing cabinet. I thought of the years I had stepped back because everyone told me stepping back was gracious. Then I looked at the partnership agreement on the table. Yes, I said. But not alone. Operations remain with the regional teams. Finance remains with its current controller. Legal review is independent. Daniel's role will be evaluated by the board, not by family assumption. No one loses a job because Charles and Lauren confuse the company with their personal stage. Daniel lowered his eyes. Charles's face reddened. You are punishing our son now? No, I said. I am asking him to earn what I was expected to give away. Gerald nodded once. That nod mattered. Not emotionally. Procedurally. Evelyn called for the vote. Temporary suspension of Charles's executive authority pending independent review. Administrative leave for Lauren Hayes pending investigation. Immediate freeze on the transition documents. Restoration of my active voting status and appointment as interim board chair for the review period. One by one, the votes came in. Yes. 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 Gerald said yes last, his voice heavy but clear. Charles stared at the table, and for the first time all morning, he looked old. Not because of his gray hair or the lines around his mouth, but because the room had stopped reflecting the version of himself he preferred. After the vote, he stood too quickly. You will regret humiliating me like this. I looked up at him. There was a time when that tone would have made my stomach twist. A time when I would have followed him into the hallway, softened my words, protected his pride so dinner could still be served. That woman had been useful to him. She was not available anymore. I did not humiliate you, Charles, I said. I stopped helping you hide. He left the boardroom without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click, not a slam. That suited the day. The loudest endings are not always the final ones. Daniel remained seated after everyone else began gathering papers. His hands were clasped together, the way they had been when he was a boy about to confess a broken lamp or a bad grade. Mom, he said, I should have asked you. I placed the folder into my bag. Yes, I said. He waited for more. Forgiveness, perhaps. Reassurance. The old motherly bridge I had spent a lifetime building before anyone asked whether I was tired of carrying people across. I did not offer it. Not then. I loved this family enough to make myself smaller, I said. Do not ask me to call that peace anymore. His eyes filled, but I turned toward the window before sympathy could weaken the lesson. Below us, employees moved through the parking lot, carrying boxes, coffee cups, clipboards, ordinary things. The company was still standing. So was I. By late afternoon, the building had settled into the strange quiet that follows an earthquake no one outside can see. Phones still rang. Orders still processed. Trucks still backed into the loading bays. Employees still walked through the halls with clipboards and coffee, pretending not to glance through glass walls when I passed. I did not blame them. People want to know whether the roof over their paychecks is still holding. I spent 3 hours with Evelyn, Marcia from Human Resources, the controller, and 2 regional managers reviewing practical matters. Payroll. Vendor payments. Delivery schedules. Store communications. Not once did I mention marriage. Not once did I mention betrayal. There would be time for grief later, when the doors were closed and no one needed me to be steady. For the moment, steadiness was not pride. It was responsibility. At 4:15, I returned to the office Charles had occupied for almost 20 years. I did not sit behind his desk. That would have felt like theater, and I had seen enough theater for one day. Instead, I stood near the window overlooking the employee parking lot and the old maple trees beyond it. Their branches were bare against the February sky, dark and still, waiting for a spring they trusted would come because it always had. On Charles's desk sat a framed photograph from our 30th anniversary. We were standing on a beach in South Carolina, my hair blown across my face, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something I could no longer remember. I picked it up, not with anger, but with a kind of careful distance, as if I were holding an artifact from a country that no longer existed. The woman in that picture did not know how much of herself she would be asked to donate to keep peace in a house where peace had become another name for obedience. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Charles called 9 times. Lauren called once from an unknown number, then sent a message saying this had gone too far and that I would regret making a private matter public. I deleted nothing. Evelyn had been very clear about that. Rebecca sent 3 messages. The first said the family needed to present a united front. The second said Daniel was devastated. The third said I should think about the grandchildren, though Daniel and Rebecca had no children, which told me she was already borrowing emotional furniture from a future she thought might work better. I did not answer her. At 5 o'clock, Daniel knocked on the open office door. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his face pale in a way that made him look more like the boy who used to come home from school pretending not to care that someone had hurt his feelings. "Can I come in?" he asked. I almost said, "It is your father's office." Then I stopped myself. No. It was not that simple anymore. "Yes," I said. He stepped inside and closed the door halfway, not fully, as if a closed door might make the conversation too honest. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked at the photograph in my hand. "I remember that trip," he said. "You brought me back that seashell paperweight." "You were 32, I said. "You still asked for souvenirs." He gave a small, broken smile. It disappeared quickly. "Mom, I need you to know I did not understand what Dad was doing." I placed the photograph back on the desk, facing down. "You understood enough to stay quiet." He flinched, but he did not argue. That was something. He said you were tired. He said you wanted less responsibility but were too proud to admit it. Rebecca said pushing the transition would be kinder than letting you feel obligated. Kinder. The word tasted old. People have used kindness to take things from women for centuries, Daniel. He looked down at his hands. They were Charles's hands, broad and well kept, with a faint scar near the thumb from a bike accident when he was 12. I had driven him to the emergency room that day while Charles stayed at a supplier lunch because the deal was important. I had not resented it then. I had told myself that was what families did. One person went out and built, the other stayed behind and held. Only later did I understand that holding is also building, unless everyone decides not to count it. "I should have asked you directly," Daniel said. "Yes. I should have noticed Lauren was." He stopped, searching for a safe word. I spared him. Positioning herself. Yes. I walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot. Charles's black sedan was still in his reserved space, though he had left the building by a side door. Lauren's white coupe was gone. That detail bothered me less than I expected. People imagine betrayal as a fire. Sometimes it is only a light turning off in a room you no longer wish to enter. Do you love him? Daniel asked quietly. The question was so young, so painfully useless, that I almost felt sorry for him. Love is not a legal defense, I said. And it is not a business plan. That is not what I meant. I know what you meant. I turned back to him. You want to know whether there is still a version of this family you can save without choosing between your parents. His eyes lifted to mine. There it was. The child inside the executive. The wish beneath the suit. There is no version where no one chooses, I said. You already chose when you let them speak for me. He nodded, tears gathering but not falling. I was grateful he did not make me comfort him for the pain of recognizing mine. What happens now? He asked. The review happens. Your father hires counsel. Lauren answers questions. The board examines every communication tied to the transition plan. You cooperate fully. You do not hide behind Rebecca, and you do not hide behind me. And us? He asked. That was the harder question. Us had once been peanut butter sandwiches after baseball practice, math homework at the kitchen table, a little boy slipping his hand into mine in parking lots. Us had become quarterly dinners, careful phone calls, Rebecca answering questions before he did, Charles shaping his future while I was encouraged to applaud from the edge. Us will depend on whether you want forgiveness or repair, I said. They are not the same thing. He wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand, embarrassed by the gesture. I want repair. Then start with truth. Not loyalty. Not comfort. Truth. A soft knock came before he could answer. Evelyn opened the door just enough to look in. Margaret, the outside counsel call is ready. I nodded. Daniel stepped aside. Before I left, he said, Mom. I stopped. For what it is worth, I am proud of you. Once, that sentence would have warmed me for days. That afternoon, it landed gently but did not enter deeply. I had spent too many years waiting for recognition from people who should not have needed disaster to see me. Thank you, I said. Then I walked past him into the hallway. Through the windows, the Valentine decorations still hung over the lobby, red paper hearts turning slowly in the air from the heating vents. They looked smaller now. Almost childish. By 6 o'clock, I had signed the notice confirming my interim board authority. By 6:30, Charles's access to executive files was suspended pending review. By 7, I sat alone in the conference room where the day had begun, eating half of a turkey sandwich Marcia had brought me from the cafeteria. It was cold. The bread was dry. I ate it anyway. Last night, I had prepared a Valentine dinner for a man who planned to erase me. Tonight, I ate beneath fluorescent lights with ink on my fingers and my name restored to company records. It was not romantic. It was better. It was real. 3 weeks after the broadcast, the Independent Review confirmed what I already knew, though seeing it written in formal language still made my hands go cold. Charles had approved a transition plan that would have reduced my voting power, removed me from active board decisions, and placed Daniel in a position that depended almost entirely on his father's recommendation. Lauren had drafted communication materials to make the change look like a graceful retirement. She had also used company systems to prepare private messaging around my supposed emotional exhaustion, my age, and my need for rest. Rest. That word appeared in 3 different documents, always presented as kindness, always pointed like a key toward a door someone else wanted me to walk through. Charles did not return to his office after the first week. His attorney sent letters. Evelyn answered them. Lauren resigned before the board could terminate her employment, though the final report made clear she would not be eligible for any severance tied to executive conduct. Rebecca stopped texting me after I did not respond to her fourth message, the one that said families should not let outsiders divide them. I almost admired the sentence for its boldness. Outsiders had not divided us. Silence had. Convenience had. The polite habit of letting powerful people rename selfishness until it sounded like leadership had. Daniel cooperated with the review. I will give him that. He turned over his emails, admitted he had seen the transition summary, and told the board he had failed to question assumptions about my wishes. It was not enough to repair everything, but it was the first honest sentence he had spoken without checking whether it would cost him. The board required him to complete a leadership evaluation and spend 6 months reporting to the Regional Operations Committee instead of directly into the executive track Charles had prepared for him. He accepted it. Not gracefully at first, but he accepted it. One evening, he came to my house carrying a cardboard box. Inside were old company photographs he had found in storage, photographs Lauren's team had pulled from archives and never used. Me at the first supplier dinner. Me signing payroll checks at the warehouse. Me standing beside a young store manager in Indianapolis after his branch survived its first difficult quarter. Daniel set the box on my kitchen table and said, "I thought these belonged with you." I looked through them slowly. In one picture, I was 31, wearing a navy dress and holding a clipboard, my hair escaping its pins in the August heat. I remembered that day. The air conditioning had failed in the Dayton store, 2 employees had called in sick, and Charles had been at a golf outing with a banker. I had driven 70 miles, handled customer complaints, approved overtime, and returned home after midnight to find Daniel asleep on the couch with a bowl of cereal beside him. No one had taken a picture of the ride home. No one had taken a picture of me washing his bowl at 1 in the morning. Women's labor often disappears in the spaces between photographs. "Thank you," I told him. He sat across from me, older than he had seemed before and younger than he wanted to be. "I do not expect you to trust me right away." "Good," I said. "Then we are beginning with truth." He nodded. We did not hug that night. I made coffee. He drank it without asking for sugar, though he has always hated it black. That was not forgiveness. It was a small table with 2 people sitting at it, trying not to lie. At the company, we changed the campaign. Built on family. Powered by trust disappeared from every screen by the end of the month. In its place, after a long meeting with employees from stores, warehouses, finance, and customer service, we chose a simpler line, built by work. Protected by truth. It was not elegant. Lauren would have hated it. That made me like it more. Charles called me once after the review was finalized. I was in my office, not his old one. I had moved into a smaller room on the 2nd floor with a window overlooking the loading docks, because I preferred watching work happen to watching myself look important. His voice sounded tired when I answered. "Margaret," he said, "after everything we built, are you really going to end our marriage this way?" I looked at the framed original lease now hanging on my wall. Both signatures. Both names. Both lives, though only one of us had tried to erase the other. "No, Charles," I said. "You ended our marriage. I am ending my participation in the performance." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I did love you." Maybe he had. Maybe in the beginning, before admiration became entitlement and partnership became a story he told with only himself in the frame. Maybe he loved the woman who stayed late, smiled politely, gave credit away, and made his life easier. But love that requires a woman to vanish is not love she can grow. Old inside. "I believe you loved what I gave you," I said. "That is not the same as loving me." I filed for legal separation the following Monday. Not because Evelyn told me to. Not because the board expected it. Because the house had become too crowded with ghosts of conversations I should have had years earlier. I kept my name, my shares, my board seat, and the pearl necklace my mother left me. Charles moved to a condo near the river. Daniel told me he had dinner with him sometimes. I did not ask for details. Children should not have to become messengers after parents finally tell the truth. 1 year later, on a cold February morning, I arrived at headquarters before 8. Snow lined the edges of the parking lot, and the old maple trees stood bare but patient under a pale sky. In the lobby, there were no paper hearts, no sentimental slogans, no forced celebration. Just employees coming in with coffee, delivery schedules, customer files, and the ordinary dignity of work. On my desk sat a small vase of white tulips I had bought for myself from the grocery store on High Street. They cost $12.99. I like them better than the roses. Roses can be arranged to apologize for lies. Tulips simply open when they are ready. At noon, we held a company meeting recognizing employees who had stayed steady during the review. I did not give a grand speech. I thanked the warehouse teams for keeping deliveries on time. I thanked finance for protecting payroll. I thanked the store managers for answering customer questions with honesty. Then I said, a company is not protected by pretending its leaders are perfect. It is protected when people are allowed to tell the truth before the damage becomes tradition. Afterward, a young woman from accounting stopped me near the elevators. She could not have been more than 25. She said, "Mrs. Whitmore, I did not know you were part of the beginning." I smiled. Neither did a lot of people. She looked embarrassed, but I touched her arm gently. That is why we keep records. That evening, I drove home as the sun lowered over Columbus, turning the winter sky lavender and gold. My house was quiet when I entered, but it no longer felt hollow. I warmed soup on the stove, placed one bowl at the kitchen table, and set the white tulips near the window. There was no card, no expensive arrangement, no man telling me forever while planning my absence. Just my name on company records, my signature restored to its proper weight, and my own breath steady in my chest. People think betrayal takes everything at once. It does not. It takes slowly. A credit here. A decision there. A chair moved farther from the table. A story retold without your name in it. And then one day, if you are lucky or brave or simply tired enough, you stop asking them to remember you. You remember yourself. Charles sent roses to hide a lie. Lauren sent a video to make me disappear. I used the truth to take back the company we built, and in the end, that was not revenge. That was correction.